Hey, so we're back here. Um, I am going to be working with this file that is called lines and transform. I should have called it paths and transform, but here's the first little sign that we call things, lots of things, different things. So lines and paths, whatever. Okay, you should open this up. You'll find it in your exercise link there for week 1. Real exciting art in this file. I know this could be challenging. Look at that S-curve. Whoa! And what a pointy triangle. Hey, come on, this is just for us to get, used to things. So just a little recap. If I were to use my selection tool and come into this file and click on one of these objects, it will select the entire object and allow me to move it in its entirety. Same with the triangle. Look at that. It's almost like animation before your very own eyes. Now, the direct selection tool, a little different, allows me to select points, move those points, independent from the entire objects as a whole. You can also do some crazy things like, oh gosh. Of course, now it's not going to let me do it. It'll happen. Sometimes it's going to happen and it's going to drive you crazy. You can sometimes grab the segments themselves and stretch them, but it's not happening. Maybe I'm getting confused with another program, like Flash or something. Gosh, couldn't you do that? I always thought you could. Greg, didn't you rehearse this beforehand? Are you kidding? Why would I do that? Anyways, Bezier handles, you can grab those things with your direct selection tool. Give yourself some funkier curves. If you have not played with these things yet, you should be getting that little exercise document open and play around with them. A few things about editing paths. If you were to select an entire path by clicking on it with the selection tool and do something like hit your delete key, the whole object will disappear. I'm going to do Command Z to bring that thing back. And if you were to switch to your direct selection tool and select an actual anchor or point and hit delete, the result is that point is gone, as well as any segments, paths, or lines that were going out in either direction from that point. So in this case, it was the segment that went from the top anchor that I deleted all the way down to the middle one. Yet there are still 2 points left on that object and one segment between them with a nice curve. So that actually gets rid of that information. If I hit undo and bring that back and select my middle anchor and hit delete, then that leaves me with just 2 points, no segments. You may think that that little handle up there is a segment, but that's actually just a handle. That would not actually show up. That's just a Bezier instructing that point at how its line segment will exit had it been attached to something else. I'll hit undo and bring that back. One last thing that you should look at, I'll get in a little closer. It doesn't really help. I wish that they were bigger so that you guys could see them. But I just want you to be able to differentiate what a selected point looks like versus a non-selected point. A non-selected point or anchor is hollow or like white inside. A selected anchor or point will be solid. In this case it's blue because my layer has been tagged to be blue. We'll talk about that later. But anyways, as long as you can identify a selected point versus a non-selected point, then we're doing good. We're in good shape here. I'm going to do Command 0 to get us back all the way zoomed out. No, I'm not going to go there yet. Okay. So these are some shapes that were created with different tools. Well, no, actually they're both created with a pen tool. But you can see that they basically have a different existence. One of them is an open path, which means it has two ends that do not unite, and one of them has a closed path, which have all of its points basically continuing in an infinity. It's closed. There's no hole anywhere, no loose ends. And that's something that we'll get into as we work with our pencil and pen tools, making sure that we understand the difference between an open and closed path. One thing now, if we get into our transform part of this little video, if you get back to your selection tool and click on one of these objects, you're going to see that there is a bounding box that surrounds the object and its selection. So not only does it look like the path is selected, but it's got this rectangle around it, basically identifying the boundaries of its artwork as it's mapped out on the coordinates here for Illustrator. That bounding box has some of its own handles. They're called handles, and these are the little boxes in the corner, top and sides and bottom. Very similar to the same handles that we saw in the artboard when we had one selected with the artboard tool. But you have a little bit more control and a few more options than you would with the artboard, because this is an object, a piece of art, and the artboard. Our artboard is always like upright, basically. What we can do with this shape once it's selected is you can modify its scale by grabbing a corner handle or one of the top or bottom handles and the side handles. This is a quick transform of scale. So they allow you to change an object's scale real quickly with a selection when using the selection tool. It also lets you hover around an outside corner, and I guess the side top handles do it too. It gives you this little arched arrow, and that is an indicator that you may rotate. So if I were to hover off of a corner, and when I see those little arrows, it's being tricky, there we go, and click and drag, I am now rotating my object. So I just rotated it, a little more than 90 degrees. Command Z brings it back. The transform feature here with the selection tool is pretty good. It's like you want to change scale, sure. You want to do a rotation, no problem. It makes it quite easy. What you'll notice when I change scale or rotation is that there are different pivot points that's happening. So when I grab a corner, it's the opposite corner that becomes sort of my my pivot point, or the point of origin for that scale change. If I grab a top handle or bottom handle, it's the opposite edge, which is sort of anchored and stuck. Same with the side. So if I grab the right side handle, it's the anchored left that makes that transform happen. I can quickly flip something over too, which is kind of cool. I guess it's only cool when you can actually see the outline of the original shape, because now I've made like a little vase. Now you can do a few things with transform of scale to change the way that that anchor behaves. The first thing is about scaling from the center. So if I wanted to scale this thing in or out, like smaller or larger, and I wanted it to be uniform in all directions, instead of being anchored opposite by the opposite corner, I could hold down Option, but first I'd want to click on the shape and then hold down Option. You can see now it's uniformly scaling out of the center. And that's kind of nice. Right now on this shape, not so cool, but it's a lifesaver. In fact, again, I was telling you about how my thumb just kind of hovers over some keys. When I'm going in to do a scale, it's just like muscle memory now. My thumb goes right to the Option key because I generally like to make scale changes from the center out. It's faster. First of all, you can double your scale with less effort, which is nice because instead of having to go further in one direction, it's going the opposite direction as well. So you can double your transform or even make it smaller quicker, which is always great. The other thing that you can do while changing the scale of something is to constrain its proportions. If I grab a corner handle, and this only works with a corner handle, if I grab a corner handle and start scaling down without holding down any keys, I can stretch it and skew it however I want. However, if I hold down Shift key while I'm doing that, no matter which direction, up or down, left or right, I drag it, it does not get it out of proportion. It keeps it proportionally scaled, and that too is a lifesaver. I can't tell you how many times I've seen poor design created by someone who just doesn't understand these principles and doesn't understand how strength is diminished in artwork when you change it from its original having a brain fart. Its original proportion. Thank you. Other part of the brain that's doing thinking for me. Yeah, to keep that proportion, in Photoshop they call it constrained proportion when you're doing like a image size change and sort of a thing. So proportion is a beautiful thing, and be it text or people, even things like plants or bugs, whatever, we all know that those things, how they should look in nature, and when someone comes in and squishes it or stretches it, it feels awkward. So it's real nice to get used to making scale changes and holding down that Shift key to make sure that your proportion is not going out of whack. So combination keys can happen if you hold down your Option or Alt key with a Shift key. Hey, you not only are scaling out from the center, but you're also keeping it proportionally scaled, which is awesome. It's awesome. Okay, so now back to rotating. If we rotate, you see that it rotates from the center of my object. That is because if we look up in the control bar, this little guy right above your window that has all these crazy buttons. Don't worry, we'll get to the buttons later. You'll notice that there's this little guy here which is called our reference point. And the reference point for every object is defaulted to the center. But if you were to choose a different reference point, maybe the top left, and I go and I rotate this thing, oh, poop, it's not doing it here. It's not doing it here. Why? Probably because I'm not using my rotate tool. Will it do it now? No, it doesn't do it. Gah, I hate it when these things don't work the way that they should. If only I had that little pen that those Men in Black guys had, I would just hold it up in front of the camera and flash it and say, forget the last 30 seconds of what I said. So this only is referring to the coordinates and the height and the width here. It's not going to affect the transform. I apologize. That was bad information. Erase what I've said. I were really clever, I'd go back and edit the video, but that's such a pain in the butt. So forget that. I'll talk about that when we get into the rotate tool. Alright, so transforming this thing with the selection tool, we've seen what we can do. There are now a few things in the object menu that deal with transform. You have transform submenu with transform again, so whatever the last thing it is that you did, it would just replicate that. So if you scaled something up from 100% to 200%, it would go another 100% to 300. Actually, maybe it might go to 400 because you doubled it. So it would probably double it. We can do moves. So a move would say, all right, well, currently the position of this is 3.741 points, whatever. Where do you want to go? You could move this thing. Just enter your horizontal or vertical move, what kind of distance you might want to do, or if you want to add an angle to that. You can do a move. I'm going to hit cancel. We can also do things like rotate. So based on rotate here, you can say I'd like to rotate this 45 degrees. And if you just want to see what it looks like, you can click on preview. So it'll show you a 45-degree rotation. You can also put in negative values here. If you're ever entering a value in a number field and preview is on, it's only going to update the preview if you hit tab. So I hit tab and it doesn't commit to the rotate, it just shows you the preview of what that rotation will look like. And we also have reflect, which is going to, I'm going to move this out of the way, a vertical reflection shows you basically, just imagine an imaginary vertical line. It's going to flip it over it. So here you can see as I check on preview and off of preview that it's flipping it, reflecting it as if it were a mirror. Or if you do horizontal, it'll actually flip it along the x-axis instead of the y. Or you could choose an angle, say like whatever, 35. I have to hit tab. There we go. So there it's reflecting on a 35-degree angle. If you hit cancel, you'll just get out of that. And then, we have a scale change. So here you have scale change if it's uniform. That's like holding down the shift key so that it changes scale in the x and y axes uniformly. Or you can go non-uniform and say I'd like to scale it, vertically horizontally along the x-axis or vertically along the y. And here's a nice little feature: scaling strokes and effects. If I were to select this and change my scale from 100 to 200 and preview this, you see that my object has increased in size, but the thickness of that line, which is called the stroke, has also doubled. I went from a 1 point to a 2 point. It doesn't show you that anywhere yet until you hit OK, but basically you can just imagine you're going up, you're doubling the scale, so that would also double the weight of your stroke. So that's handy, but not always great to use. It's something to keep in mind. You're making something larger. Should the stroke get larger with it, or should it stay in its native size? I'll hit cancel, go back. And then we have shear and shearing. If I had to go like to 20. Basically is kind of like grabbing the top part of your object and the bottom part and dragging them in opposite directions. So like in this case, the top went to the right, the bottom went to the left. So shearing is kind of like making things slant, sort of. I'll hit cancel, get out of that. So those transformations are something you can do through a menu, or you can use some of the tools. And if you go down to right around the middle of the toolbar, you'll see something that looks like a dotted circle with an arrow, and that is your rotate tool. So the rotate tool, when you have it selected, you can see, oh, barely, there's a tiny little crosshair at the dead center reference point of your object, and that is where you are going to rotate around. Now, if you can grab that crosshair and put it, you got to be careful when you grab it, and put it basically anywhere you want. So I could put it right on this first point, basically. And now when I grab my path and rotate it, you see that I'm pivoting along that point instead of the center where it defaults to. So that comes in handy when you're trying to make a bit more of a calculated rotation where you need to have it anchored down at a certain point. So if you click anywhere without dragging, you move that reference point, that anchor point that you're going to rotate along. I believe we can put some, well, snap the point is on. So say smart guides too might help you make sure that you're along the path. So as you are dragging that little registration point, you can snap it kind of along the path as long as you're close. It's like within a 6 pixel area, and then it'll also snap to points, so you'll kind of see the little green cheat say, yeah, you're on the path right now, or as soon as you hit a point, it says anchor, and that means that when you let go, you're definitely on that point instead of just sort of eyeballing it and not getting exact. And that is from using smart guides. Turn that off. The other thing you can do with this transformation tool is double click on it, and it opens up the rotate window, the same window that we got from going up to Object, Transform, Rotate. So this tool just serves the purpose of the window, but it gives you a bit more control because you actually get your hands in there and you can do dragging and actually see the change happen, and get your anchor point exactly where you want it. Hidden underneath that is the Reflect tool, and the Reflect tool also has this reference point that is going to be the point in which your artwork is reflected on. So if you were to click and drag, right away you see that you flipped it. So instead of having an S, I've got a backwards S, and as I drag it, I can kind of put it wherever I want. But it reflected it, it changed it, flipped it. That anchor point could be set anywhere, and that is the point in which your reflection will occur. You also just get the rotation out of it. So not only are you mirroring it or flipping it over, you also get the chance to rotate it as well. Generally, I find more success when using this tool by double clicking on it and opening the reflect and saying, I would like to reflect along the horizontal axis or the vertical axis. And the other thing that's handy is that you can do a copy. So instead of hitting OK and just having your line flipped, you can say, yeah, I like the results, but what I'm looking for is to create some new shape or some new part of the design, and I want it to be part of it. So I hit copy, and it gives me another version of that artwork. Oh, we can see that we have a fill going on here. I kind of forgot we had a fill, but whatever, you get the idea. We copied the artwork. So that is pretty sweet. So that's found under the double clicking of this. We'll do some tricks with that later on. Underneath that tool we have our scale tool. The scale tool allows you to select something and change its scale. So it's very similar to the selection tool, but a little more sensitive and a little more tweaky, and I don't have to hold down Option to get it to scale out from the center. I could still hold down Shift though, and it'll keep some of those changes somewhat proportional. Whoa. Depending on where you grab it. So you can also change the point in which this is scaled by just clicking anywhere when that object is selected, and it'll relocate your reference point. And now I'm scaling from the bottom of that shape instead of the middle or just somewhere random. You can also double click on it and pull up the same window that we found in the Object menu. Underneath that, we have the Shear tool. And the Shear tool is doing the shearing that I was talking about. Whoa, you get some crazy results if you move things too fast. But there's that sort of shear effect. You know, I can almost stretch it out and get like a straight line. So that's shearing. And then underneath there is the reshape tool. We'll hit that later. So those are really just the transform tools I wanted to talk about today. I want you to play with those so you have this file in your exercises area and just get in there and play with it. The more comfortable you are and the more experienced you are observing the results of these different tools and processes, the better you'll be at trying to get what you want out of your work. I know we're still talking about a really simple curved line here in a triangle. God, the poor triangle really didn't get any attention today. That is part of your exercise. Give that triangle a little attention. Stop, keep it from looking so sad down there. Neglected little triangle. Triangle Man is so powerful. Okay, yeah, next up, pencil.